Session of the subject of airport engineering. We are continuing with chapter number 2, that is airport planning as per the textbook. In the previous session, we have completed more than half of the topics of this chapter, and now in this session, we will be completing the remaining topics, and also we shall be completing this chapter. So let's begin with the new topics of this session. The first topic which we are going to study in today's session is the characteristics of an ideal airport layout. We studied various features pertaining to the airport layout in the previous session. Now this topic deals with what are the sort of features should an ideal airport layout have. So let's see the points in it. Operation of landing, taxiing and takeoff are carried smoothly without interference. Now landing and takeoff we are already aware about. Taxiing is that movement which is between runway and the apron or hangar through the taxiway. So basically taxiing is that movement which takes place on the taxiway. So while these various operations are taking place, that is be it landing, be it takeoff, or be it the movement through the taxiway, they should not interfere with each other. Taxiway distances should be as minimum as possible, so that we can reach from the runway to the apron or hangar as early as possible, and the time is also not wasted. Adequate space for the loading apron. So basically the parking space where the loading and unloading of passenger and cargo is to be carried out. Adequate amount of space should be there as per the peak demand. It should not be such that during the peak hours the aircraft does not have space to carry out its loading and unloading operation. Terminal building facilities, all the basic terminal building which is going to handle the passengers or be it any other terminal areas such as aprons or hangars, they all should have the basic facilities which should be available as per the need. Next is the safe runway length and approaches. We have already studied the calculation of runway length in detail in the runway design chapter. So that length should be safe enough to carry out the various operations ultimately which will be done on the runway, and the approaches to the runway should also be safe. That is, while we are moving from the holding apron to the runway, even that movement should be safe. Good control tower visibility. So control tower is basically the focal point from where the monitoring of the aircraft is being done. That is where it is moving, what is its alignment, what path is it following. That is in both the cases, that is while it is landing or while it is taking off. So the control tower should have good visibility, that is the aircraft should be clearly visible from that focal point so that monitoring can be done with ease. Minimum construction cost, so that is an obvious point that cost should be as much minimum as possible, and sufficient land for the future expansion. With increasing number of passengers, with increasing number of operations, we have to always keep the future expansion in the back of our mind. So sufficient land should be available for that purpose. Next topic is the land use around the airport. So specifically, what is the usage of the land which is surrounding the airport? Land can be divided into cultivated land or non-cultivated land, that is on which growth can take place or where growth cannot take place of food, that is pertaining to the agricultural aspect. It can be residential, commercial, industrial or for recreational purpose. So there can be very basic as such usages of the land. Now here we shall be discussing as to what specific land usage can have an effect on the operations which are being carried out at the airport. So all these various aspects which are of the land use, what effect would they have on the airport? So industries give out smoke which will obstruct the visibility, thus should not be allowed around. So if it is an industrial zone in the vicinity or in the nearby, then due to the smoke they will have an impact or influence on the visibility, which is not a desirable thing. Agricultural use may be permitted as long as birds aren't attracted. Now, if there is an agricultural land use, cultivated land is there, then certainly it will attract birds, and due to that, at the time of landing takeoff operation, there are chances of bird hit. So, agriculture use might be allowed, but we have to check what is the amount of birds which are being attracted by that specific land area. Forests aren't good around, as birds might again influence, so does ponds. So existence of forest or existence of water body also will attract birds, which will again create the same problem, that is of bird heat, and so that will have to be kept in mind. Power lines should be under the permissible height limit. So the electricity lines basically should be of a certain extent only, because if they are above a certain height, then again they might be obstruction at the time of the operation of the aircraft. Big public gathering such as auditoriums are undesirable due to the noise nuisance. So if the vicinity area has existence of auditoriums, or if there is any such scope for big public gatherings, then there might be an issue of the noise nuisance being created, so that is not desirable. Residential area within 5 kilometers are undesirable because of noise, because if they are also touched too close to the airport, then it will create constant noise, and the residential area will sort of be hampered. There would be not much scope for peace or silence. There would be continuous noise, and so it is not recommended to have a residential area until the range of 5 kilometers from the site. Next topic is the airport capacity, and basically capacity deals with how many amount of operations can the specific airport handle, and landing and takeoff both are counted as separate operations. So how many number of operations can take place, that is basically termed as airport capacity. So the number of aircraft movements which an airport can process within a specified period of time with an average delay to the departing aircraft within the acceptable time limit is defined as airport capacity. So what sort of features I have been included here is that, firstly, the number of aircraft movements, that is landing and takeoff, which can be processed, which can be handled within a certain duration of time with a sort of allowable delay. There is a range, that is range for allowable delay depending upon the operation, depending upon the number of aircrafts. So if the movement is within that permissible delay and within the acceptable time limit, so there is not an issue. So that is how many amount of aircrafts are being handled is termed as airport capacity, and as I told that landing and takeoff both are termed as separate operations. Next topic are the factors which are affecting the airport capacity. So these are the basic factors which will be ultimately deciding as to what is the capacity of the airport. First is the runway configuration and the connected taxiway. Now runway configuration or runway pattern we have studied in detail in the runway design chapter itself. There we have discussed various aspects also. So that has been studied in the runway design, and you can go through that portion again if you want to recall this point. Taxiway should clear the landing aircraft from runway as early as possible. We have already studied this point as well, that the earlier the runway is cleared by an aircraft, the another aircraft can make use of that runway. So if it is designed for a high turn-off speed, and as early as the aircraft clears the runway, it can be made use of much more. So that will increase the number of operation, and so ultimately it will increase the airport capacity. Next are the aircraft characteristics. So it includes the point that smaller aircrafts, that is which have lesser dimensions, can be served more than the bigger aircraft. So if a specific airport has sort of traffic which is of smaller aircrafts, then certainly its capacity will be more than an airport which is handling aircrafts which are of higher dimension. So that is a factor. Permissible delay to the departing aircraft. As number of aircraft movement increases, delay in departure also increases. Now, permissible delay basically indicates that amount or that duration up till which delay is basically allowed. So as the number of aircraft movement will increase, also the scope or the amount of delay will also increase. Economical airport is one in which the cost of delay plus runway and facility is minimum. So if we talk about the economy of the airport, one in which the cost of delay, that is, now cost of delay means the cost of the time which has been wasted. Delay is the additional travel time. So basically the cost of the time which has been wasted plus the runway cost, construction cost, and plus the cost of the facilities, that is the various terminal facilities, is minimum, is termed as the economical airport. Terrain and man-made obstruction. Obstruction may restrict the number of incoming and outgoing aircraft, reducing the capacity. So in the vicinity, if there is existence of any natural obstruction or if any man-made obstruction of a considerable height, then certainly that will have an impact on the airport capacity. Next factor are the navigational aids. Now navigational aids basically are those tools which will aid in easy navigation or easy movement and ease in finding the direction. So the number and type of aids provided will affect the airport capacity. How much amount of aids are provided and which are the various types of aids, we will be learning about this in the chapter number 7. So basically what is the amount, what is the type will have an effect. If there is an airport which does not have any navigational aid, it would have lesser capacity as compared to that airport which has a higher number of navigational aids. So that is a point. Aircraft can be handled more quickly and effectively where the navigational aids are provided, because it will sort of make the process very simpler at the time of landing or takeoff. Terminal area facility. The lack of facilities will provide limit to the handling capacity of runways. If the facility for handling the aircraft is limited, then also that will have an impact on the number of aircrafts or the number of operations which are being handled, and will ultimately affect the capacity of the airport. So these are the basic factors affecting the airport capacity. Next topic is the airport size. Now which are the factors which are ultimately affecting the size of the airport? First is the elevation of the airport site. Higher the site, lesser will be the density of air, and thus greater runway length will be needed, and more the runway length, more would be the airport size. This point we have studied in detail in the chapter of runway design as well. Meteorological condition. Important parameters are wind and temperature. Wind direction and velocity will decide the number of runway and their configuration. Again, the point which we have studied, that is the runway configuration or runway pattern. More the number of runways, again the size of airport will be increased as well, and also the configuration of the runway, whether it is parallel runway or it is intersecting runway or non-intersecting runway, even that will have the effect on the airport size. Increase in temperature will decrease the air density and require larger run before taking off. That is, again it will increase the runway length, and so it will increase the airport size. Again, this we have studied in the runway design chapter. Next is the volume of traffic, that is the number of operations. It will influence the number and arrangement of runway, arrangement of taxiway. So what are the number of operation, number of aircraft will influence as to how many number of runways are to be provided, what should be the configuration of the runway, and what should be the arrangement of taxiway, because depending upon the number of runway and depending upon the pattern of the runway, ultimately the arrangement of taxiway is decided. So all these points are coordinated with each other. Characteristic of aircraft, that is aircraft requiring longest run in landing or takeoff will decide the length of runway. Now if at an airport various types of aircraft are to be handled, then the one which requires the longest run at the time of landing or takeoff will ultimately have the count of the length of runway, and ultimately depending upon it, the size of the airport will be influenced. Next are the zoning laws. Now zoning laws, the topic basically deals with sort of establishing a control regarding the land use surrounding the airport site. So zoning laws include restrictions to the development of area surrounding the airport, so that no structure protrudes above obstruction clearance line. So sort of limiting the development of the surrounding area in such a manner that no structure which has been constructed obstructs the operation which are to be carried out at the airport. So the objectives of zoning basically includes first, zoning for safe landing and takeoff. So limiting the height of the structures surrounding, limiting their use in such a manner that there is no any obstruction at the time of landing or takeoff operation to the aircraft, protecting the flight path. Now whichever path which has been decided for the movement of the aircraft, to protect that path means along the path also there should be no such any obstruction, any structure which will sort of create hindrance during the movement. Control development of property within the approach zone. Approach zone basically indicates that portion or the path along which the movement will take place. So controlling regarding the development of the property in that path, so that there is no such any land use which will be having an influence on that path, or which might be creating sort of an hindrance during the movement along a specific path. Prevent the undesirable tall structures and prevent construction of heavy industries, because we have seen the main point in the industries that the smoke being released will have an impact on the visibility. So to prevent the construction of heavy industries, limiting the visibility. Zoning laws basically has two bifurcations, that is regarding the height and regarding the usage of the land. So we will be seeing both the parts. Essential part of an airport master plan to be implemented as soon as final selection of the airport site is made. Zoning laws is a vital part of the master plan which is sort of decided or which has to be implemented. Airports are involved in the two types of zoning. So let us first see the height zoning. Main aim is to protect the approaches to the airport from obstruction. As the word itself used is height. So along the approaches, along the path, to make sure that there is no any structure which is exceeding the limit of or the constraint of a height, so as to cause hindrance during the operation. Regulates the height of structure on land surrounding the airport. So limit is fixed that the structures which are surrounding the airport site, which are in the vicinity, are not supposed to exceed this limit of height. Standards are formed keeping in mind size of the airport. What is the size of the airport? That will have an influence on deciding the limit of the height of the structure, and the type of aircraft which will be using it. So which type of aircraft is going to sort of carry out its operation at the airport will have an influence on fixing that standard limit of height. Next zoning is regarding the usage of the land. So land use zoning. Commercial, industrial and recreational activities should not interfere with the aircraft operation. We discussed this point in the zoning laws, that is they will have an influence. Industries, recreational activities regarding the noise nuisance will have an effect at the time of carrying out the operations. This point, that is industries generating the smoke or dust, we have already discussed, should not be allowed in the vicinity as it might reduce the visibility. Agricultural use in the vicinity should not be attracting birds. Again, this point we have discussed. With reference to the zoning laws, below factors should be kept in mind. Legal interest, that is should not interfere with the legal interest to the landowners with airspace above their land. Now this point means that those landowners which have the airspace above their land, airspace is that portion while we are that portion on which the movement of the aircraft will take place. So basically that land belongs to someone else, but above that land in the airspace the movement of the aircraft will take place. So there should not be any dispute between the landowner and between the authority of the airport. Nature of the ordinance, that is zoning laws, should not be unreasonable or imposed forcefully. So whatever measures have been decided to limit the sort of we can say a limit or control measure has been decided regarding the land usage, then that should not be forcefully imposed or it should not be unreasonable on the side of the authority who is imposing it for the land owners. Framed to promote the welfare of the public, basically the measures should be made to understood to the people that it is ultimately for the welfare of the public, that the airport itself is a sort of, we can say, commodity which will increase the welfare of the public. So that should be sort of mindset while framing the laws, or while sort of if any dispute is arisen, then that should be the ultimate point which should be made to understood to the land owners. Zoning map, it should include the property line, that is the ultimate circumference or the periphery of the site. Land use pattern surrounding the airport, what is the usage of land. Permissible height of the structures, that is what is the extent up to which the height of the construction is allowed in the vicinity of the site, and limit up to which zoning laws would be applicable, that is up to what extent, up to what space or area the zoning laws are applicable. All these various measures are represented in the zoning map. Next, and the last topic of this chapter and also of this session are the environmental consideration for the airport. Following two studies are made to assist the project authorities in planning of the airport. One is EIA and one is EIS. First is EIA, that is the Environment Impact Assessment. So procedure for finding out potential effect on the environment system due to construction of a new airport or expansion of an existing one. So this point includes what would be the ultimate effect on the environmental system by constructing a new one or by modifying an existing airport. Mainly where serious environmental situation may arise, such as, so this is carried out in a certain situation which are the critical situation where the habitats of wildlife getting disrupted. If there is a possibility of the natural habitat of the wildlife, that is where they are staying, if there is a possibility of it getting disrupted due to the construction or modification, there this assessment has to be carried out. Streams or major drainage courses getting reshaped. If there is a natural stream, if there is a major drainage course or path which is getting reshaped due to the construction, that is its alignment is changing, then again this assessment has to be carried out. EIA should indicate how these disruptions might be reduced. If there is a point such that this wildlife habitat is getting disrupted, or if natural stream is getting reshaped, then the EIA report has to reflect as to how would that effect be reduced or mitigated. So that is regarding the EIA. Next is the Environmental Impact Statement, that is EIS. EIA is used to prepare EIS, that is the impact assessment, is used to prepare the impact statement, which includes the following details. Adverse effect which can be avoided. So as we gave an example in the previous slide, if there is an adverse effect on the wildlife or on the water body, then how can it be avoided, that is shown. Environmental impact of the proposed development, minimizing the harmful impact, that is what sort of impact it is creating which is sort of being hazardous to the existing wildlife, then how can it be reduced. Plus and minus point of the project with reference to the environmental resources. If it is making use of any environmental resources, enhancing the resources, then it would be a plus point. If it is destroying the existing resources, then it is a minus point. So ultimately, what are the plus and minus point of that specific construction with reference to the environmental resources? Provision for observation and checking of environmental conditions. So what is the provision? What facilities have you made for observing the condition after construction of the airport site and making sure that whatever the situation is, either it is remaining stable, or if we are enhancing the existing wildlife or the natural resources, that has to be mentioned. Remedial measure to minimize the impact, as we have already seen. EIS should clearly identify problems which are likely to affect the environmental quality. So a mention should be made regarding what problems are likely to occur with reference to the environmental quality, along with the proposed remedy regarding the same. That we are, after sort of planning, creating the schedule, we are likely to understand that it would be having these certain effects on the environment. So we will be sort of noting down which are the aspects which will be sort of having an effect on the quality, and as per the technical point of view, we shall be suggesting the remedial measures regarding it as well. So that's it for this session, and that's it for this chapter as well. We have completed the chapter of airport planning, and from the next session we will be beginning with the new chapter of the airport engineering portion.